All right, let's jump straight into this explainer. Today, we're diving into one of the most brutal, absolutely defining events in British colonial history, the Jallianwala Bagh Massacre. But we're not just going to look at what happened on that one tragic day. No, we're going to trace its profound ripple effects across the decades and dig into the fierce, modern debate over how we actually remember and preserve sites of such immense trauma.
Here is our roadmap for today. We'll be moving through 4 key parts: the massacre of 1919, Tagore's intellectual defiance, the patient assassin, and finally, the struggle for memory.
Section 1. The Massacre of 1919. Let's see how a local spring gathering turned into an absolute nightmare that permanently fractured the trust of an entire nation.
So picture the spring of 1919. It's an absolute powder keg in the Punjab region. Starting in March with some highly restrictive new laws, the tension just skyrocketed, leading to mass protests and the arrest of popular local leaders. And it all finally came to a head on April 13th, the day of the traditional Baisakhi festival, ending in unimaginable bloodshed.
To really get why people were protesting, we have to talk about the spark that lit the fuse, the Rowlatt Act. Imagine waking up during peacetime and finding out your basic civil liberties are just gone. Following World War I, the British enacted this law to basically extend wartime emergency measures indefinitely. It stripped citizens of their rights to a trial, which, as you can imagine, fueled intense, widespread anger and really unified resistance against British rule.
Now, when you hear the word garden, you probably think of a wide-open park, right? Well, scratch that. Jallianwala Bagh was quite literally a physical trap. It was this 6 to 7 acre space completely enclosed by the backs of buildings and high walls. It only had 5 extremely narrow entrances, and several of those actually had lockable gates. It was essentially a walled box with almost 0 ways out. So when the troops arrived, they immediately blocked the main exit. And here is a number that is just staggering: 1,650. That is how many rounds Brigadier General Dyer ordered his troops to fire directly into the absolute densest parts of a trapped crowd made up entirely of unarmed civilians.
10 minutes. For 10 agonizing minutes, continuous shooting just tore through the panicked crowd. And the wildest part? The firing didn't stop because the crowd dispersed. It only stopped because the soldiers were literally on the verge of running completely out of bullets.
The aftermath was, frankly, a massive point of contention. The official British estimates claimed 379 dead, but independent Indian investigations by the Sewa Simiti and the Indian National Congress reported over 1,500 casualties, estimating about 1,000 dead. And the victims weren't just men, They included women, the elderly, and children, including a baby as young as 6 weeks old.
Listen to this quote from Dyer's later testimony to the Hunter Commission. It is absolutely chilling. He openly admitted he probably could have dispersed the crowd without firing a single shot, but he chose mass murder simply to avoid making a fool of himself and to punish them for disobedience. That sheer, casual lack of remorse absolutely stunned the entire nation.
Section 2. Tagore's intellectual defiance. Let's shift gears and look at how India reacted to this atrocity, starting with a powerful intellectual protest from one of the country's greatest minds.
Now, the news was heavily censored at first, but by late May 1919, word finally reached Rabindranath Tagore. Tagore was a globally revered Nobel laureate, and he leveraged his immense cultural status to deliver this highly sophisticated act of protest. He wrote directly to Viceroy Lord Chelmsford to officially renounce his British knighthood.
In his own eloquent words to the Viceroy, he didn't hold back. Tagore cast away his knighthood so he could stand in solidarity with his countrymen. He wrote that he wished to stand shorn of all special distinctions by the side of those subjected to degradation not fit for human beings. It was a profound, highly symbolic rejection of colonial authority.
Section 3. The Patient Assassin. Because while Tagore fought back with the power of the pen, another survivor of the massacre chose a vastly different and much more violent path of vengeance decades later.
Let's track Udham Singh's astonishing 21-year journey. He was an orphan who was actually there, serving water to the crowd at Jallianwala Bagh on the day of the massacre. Nursing his immense grief, he became a revolutionary, joined the Ghatna Party, and spent years traveling the globe before finally making his way to London. There, he waited all the way until 1940 to exact his revenge.
So, who was his ultimate target? Well, Singh didn't go after Dyer, mostly because Dyer had already died back in 1927. Instead, he targeted Michael O'Dwyer, the former lieutenant governor of Punjab. This was the guy who oversaw the region and explicitly approved Dyer's actions. At a public meeting at Caxton Hall in London, Singh concealed a revolver in a book, calmly walked up and shot O'Dwyer, killing him almost instantly.
In court, Singh was totally unapologetic. He made his motivations crystal clear and explicitly stated he felt absolutely no remorse. Interestingly, while in custody, he used the name Ram Muhammad Singh Azad. It's this brilliant alias that unified the Hindu, Muslim, and Sikh religions of India while expressing his demand to be free. He made it known he welcomed the death penalty if it meant striking a blow against British imperialism, and he was hanged later that year.
Section 4. The Struggle for Memory. Now, let's fast forward a whole century to 2021. The physical site of the massacre has actually become the center of a fierce, modern debate about historical preservation.
Just look at this stark contrast. On one hand, you have the grim, inescapable reality of 1919. On the other, you have these highly controversial new government renovations. What was once a historic trap of sheer terror and somber mourning has been upgraded. They added a newly created exit, murals of smiling faces along the passage walls, a 28-minute laser light and sound show, and lotus ponds. Critics have loudly and very publicly condemned this as a Disneyfication of a mass murder site.
Impartially speaking, historians and conservation architects are quick to point out that these upgrades seem to flout international conservation guidelines. For instance, the Venice Charter explicitly states a monument is inseparable from its history, and the Nara document demands authenticity above all else. Critics argue that adding these sort of gaudy tourist attractions erases the raw, terrifying authenticity of the space. It's raising some very serious concerns about the politicization and corporatization of heritage sites globally.
And that leaves us with a really tough, vital question to take away. How should a nation balance making a site accessible and modernized for visitors without wiping away the uncomfortable, solemn truth of its past? What does authentic preservation actually mean when you are trying to remember an atrocity? Think about that the next time you visit a historical site. Keep learning, and I'll catch you in the next explainer.